let's start. We are going to play some 9-max sit and goes today, and I have already started a few, or I have started because there have been a new sit and go buy-in level on PokerStars. So the 9-max turbos now start at 50 cents, and even these 50-cent sit and goes, they are having reasonable rakes, so I think these are probably the games that you can play with the lowest bankroll that you can have. And we'll see what the game looks like in here. And I think that we will see some pretty amazing moves in these games. And of course the structure is the same in practically every 9-max sit and go. There is 50% of the prize pool that goes to the winner, 30% for the second player, and the third player gets 20%. So when you are thinking about it, just getting to the money guarantees you 20% of the prize pool, and the 20% is given to everyone, so the first, the second, and the third, so you can share the 60% of the prize pool by just getting into money. So that makes it pretty important for you to get in the money. And that's something that I presume that people will have a lot of problems in these microstakes sit and goes, that they are taking too much risks when they are going nearer the bubble. The bubble is going to be a real deciding factor in this, and it will be something that if you are playing the bubble well, you can increase your ROI hugely. And it's nice to see that these games, when they start registering, they will fill in less than a minute. And even when they fill in less than a minute, we can already see that some players have registered to a game and then just sitting out, and that's something that you shouldn't be seeing in the games. Interesting. I should have $60 games here, but well, there is nobody registered to those yet, so we are not taking a look on those. But the 9-max sit and goes are pretty nice structure, and you can find a lot of material online on how to play these 9-max sit and goes. Here we are having a great hand, and our opponent limps to us on the button, so we don't mind if we are getting the pot pre-flop with 8s. And I'm carrying on even though there is a king on the table, because I think that we will get the pot pretty often. And now that we are also getting a queen there, if the opponent carries on betting, I will be folding. And this, I think that most of the players on the microstakes are making more mistakes in playing too passively. So I tend to believe that the guy has a king, or might even have some force here. On the top table, the king queen 10 suited, it's a solid hand, and I think you can call here or you can fold here. And folding is a bit easier, so if you are bet-chinning in these games, I think that folding will be better. And now we also got some $30 games open, and they seem to be the highest that run right now. The Thursday evening isn't the best. And here, when opponent min raises, I'm going to be 3-betting on the button with ace-10 off. And the opponent min raised and then re-raised, but re-raised small, and I'm thinking that my ace-10 is probably not good here, and I'm putting this guy to a range that includes pretty much pocket pairs, 9s up and something like ace king, ace queen. So I'd need something like I'd say jacks, jacks or queens, or then ace king to carry on in that spot. And I think that the opponent's range will be weaker if he just shoves there as a 4-bet opposed to 4-betting small. And yeah, versus a min raise, it's somewhat compelling to call with queen-10 suited. Suited, I agree. And as Calleon said, that everybody likely knows the ICM side perfectly in 0 point or $half games, so a lot of ICM pressure on the bubble. That's probably something that will not happen, but in general I think that the bad opponents are the same, or we can see the same kind of opponents in these $30 games that we are seeing in these $half games. But most of the players in $30 games will be at least somewhat solid, and most of the players in these $half games are most likely pretty non-solid. So if we can see, I think that I'll presume that we will see that at least 7 of these players in the $half sit and goes are going to be not that good, and on these $30 sit and goes, I'm presuming that there will be at least 4 good players in the table. So, but we will be focusing on a solid strategy during this. So even though there might be something that will be slightly plus EV, we are not taking all of these plus EV spots, and we are likely avoiding some of those harder spots. Ace 10 off is going to be the worst hand that I'm opening UTG plus one, but it's on the edge. I think it's profitable on most games, and when we are getting 3 called and then we are getting a 3-bet, we are likely behind. And now we got the $30 game open. So as you can see that I know some of the players in these $30 games, but practically not anyone at these 50-cent games. So it will be interesting to see how it develops. But I think that the players, this 10-9 suited is ugly, because I don't think that the opponent here will be calling that great. And if we would be on the big blind, I would be calling this 10-9 suited, because it's going to play well against the opponent's range there, and there will be enough dead money on the pot. But when we are having someone behind us, we are not that enticed to be calling there. And here I'm going to open the buttons pretty widely. I think that the players are going to be playing these spots pretty wrong, and I think that they will be, in general, they will be calling perhaps a bit too much, but I think also that they will be giving up too much. And I think that when we are having a really crappy kicker, it doesn't make much sense to carry on there. And the 4, even though it makes our hand look better, but it still doesn't make our hand any better when there are also 2 6s on the table. And when I check the turn, I'm going to be calling the river. I think that there might be some hands that he will be bluffing here, and we are opening ourselves up for some bluffs when we are checking the turn. and long ago. I think that there are at least one or two Estonian members, if you don't count us. But I think that's something that if you are thinking about the 3-pair hand, it's still 2 pairs, but it looks prettier when both of your pocket pairs have paired. But when it happens on the river, it just doesn't give you any more equity. Min bet on the flop seems a bit insane, but we are getting such a great odds there that we are pretty compelled to call, even though we don't have anything on the flop. But when he bets more, I think that we are just going to give it up. You don't need to win every pot, and you will likely be losing a lot of money if you try to win every pot. Here Damien opens 4.5 big blinds. Now it's all about thinking about his range, and when this opponent calls that plays with a tablet, it becomes a great opportunity for us to shove because there's so much money in the pot already. And I think that most of the players are just saying that if you are playing the smallest stake, just play tighter, and I think it's not that easy because there are a lot of spots that people are playing non-optimally in these lower levels if they're just playing tighter. And we got called with 4-5 suited, so that's something. Not even 4-5 suited, 4-3 suited. And here with tens, when UTG opens, there is a fishy player calling. I will be 3-betting this, and I will be hoping. I think that this is kinda nasty, because if both of our opponents call, we are pretty much screwed on most of the flops. But when we are out of position, we might be good by just calling this and playing pretty weakly. So playing the tens weaker than we should in general. And just look for a spot with... And when we are out of position, there are not a lot of position plays that we can do, so it will be more likely. And when the Petersen that has been betting small bet small, and we are also having an okay flush draw, I can't believe that he would have that great of a hand there, but we are still bluff catching, and it would have been really bad for us to hit the flush with something like a jack there, because then there would be only a king that would have been a better flush. But this is something that with tens, it's about 40% of the time we would have still an overpair on the flop. So investing less on that pot would also be an option, and a decent option. And I don't know, can I see here the average table stats, because I think that would be pretty interesting as well. And what I'm thinking about in these 50-cent games, I'm thinking that when we are, for example, when the blinds go up, I think that opponents in these $30 games are calling a shove in a great position or a raise in a great position. They are calling it tighter in these games than in $30 games. So I think that if an opponent here might be calling something like a 15% pretty much always, it might be if we are next to someone like Shy Cakes. If we are on the SB and we are shoving when he's only having something like 8 big blinds left, he might be calling us with something like 25 to 30% range, And in here, opponents are going to be making mistakes on those spots. And also, but if we are taking it to the other side, if we are, for example, if we are the biggest stack, we would be in a position to pressure Shy Cakes that he would be a second stack and there would be 2 small stacks on the table. I think that he will know that he can't be playing without a good pocket pair in that kind of situation. But I think in these 50-cent turbos, the general opponents will not know it, and they will likely play with a way too wide of a range in those spots and calling us with something like ace-jack suited or even ace-10 suited, ace-jack off. And here we got 8s and opponent opened 2.5 big blinds. We had only 18 big blinds left. Usually I'm having a 10 times rule in use. So if the opponent raises, for example, to 250, I'm checking my stack size that if I'm having less than 10 times more than that, so if my opponent is raising, let's say my opponent is raising 250, and in this spot the opponent had 2,540 chips, I had 1,840 chips left. So effectively our stack size was 18 big blinds. And when our stack size was effectively 18 big blinds, or it was approximately 7.5 times more than what would be needed to call, then I'm always asking myself, is it going to be best to be shoving in this spot? So if you have less than 10 times effectively against your opponent, you should always be thinking that should I be shoving this hand? And I'm going to make a really small 3-bet. If the opponents have something, I want to entice them to call. And this is something that I think that will be something that you should be doing in the smaller stakes, that even though you are telegraphing your hand that I'm having a great hand, if the opponents aren't looking for your signs, it doesn't matter, you can exploit them with the great hands a lot of the time. And you can get called by so much worse, and it doesn't matter how you get the chips. It matters that you are doing your best to get the chips when you are having a great hand in these 0.50, and it doesn't matter that your opponents could exploit you if they knew, because if they are not looking at what you are doing and they are not understanding and they are just looking mostly at their own cards, it makes it a lot better. And here, if the opponent would have min raised, I would have called with 8-7 off. But without antes, I don't see that much value in going against a tight player. If he would have been a reg that opens a lot from small blind, I would have defended even 8-7 off just to make them angry in the mid-stakes games. But when he has been playing 22 hands and not playing a single hand, I can't be thinking that he will be opening close to any 2 on the small blind there. So that's something to think about. And also something like opening from cutoff or opening from button widely. I think it's also good that you learn to play with slightly wider ranges, and when you are playing with a weaker hand, you are always then playing in position if you are opening your game up from the button. And that's important because it's really a lot easier to play when you are playing with a weaker range. It's really a lot easier when you have position. If you are playing with a weak hand out of position, you'll usually get into really tough situations. And Calleon has had a nasty hand. That's a 9 max bubble. Stacks are like 8,000, 2,500 and 3,000. And could have shoved with 8k, and he had an ace-king suited in big blind, and he was watching action thinking that please call, SB call, and he folded and you had to fold ace-king suited. I think that's an interesting hand also because even if the button would have called, even though the button's range, if the button is a sensible guy, the button's range is going to be tight. I think it might make it a call for you. But if SB calls, then it's easier because then you are not risking that much, and that's also an important hand to explain that why there is such a great meaning if the small blind is calling or not. Because if you are in a situation that you are the shortest stack all in, like if there is a player with 8,000 chip stack, a 500 chip stack and a 3,000 chip stack all in, if the 8,000 chip stack player wins, in that kind of situation the 3,000 chip stack player will get the third place money, but the player that with 500 chip stack, he doesn't get the money even if he would have a better hand than the 3,000 chip player. And this is important because it means that if you are in the bubble, if you are thinking about that you are going to get third into a pot and you are having the shortest stack, you need to be beating the opponent's ranges with a really you need to be beating your opponent's range by a lot. And here on the 50 cent turbo, usually I would be min raising this, but I think that in these 50 cent turbos we are exploiting our opponent's tendencies to call too wide by opening larger than what we would open in a mid-stakes game. Like in here, if we are about 20 big blinds deep, effectively I start already min raising. And here I will be exploiting the opponents in a way that when I'm having a better hand, I will be raising a bit more, at least if I'm having call happy players with deep stacks in the same table. Because then I'm going to get more chips in the pot more often. But that was actually a really good hand on Caleon's part on how to explain the situations. And this is also an interesting hand that's going on in the 50 cent game. And it's less interesting when Christie PDL calls. But usually in these kind of spots, I'd like to see if the opponent, when an opponent is short stacked, if the opponent is short stacked because he loses a big pot from the previous hand, his range is going to be way wider than in a situation that the opponent would have just folded his chip stack to a short stack, or like lost a big pot an orbit ago and then just folded. But if an opponent loses a big stack or loses a big pot, I think the opponents that are randoms are going to be playing that hand pretty badly, because the opponents are going to be tilting slightly for losing the big pot, and then they are just like, no matter what happens anymore, let's just shove it and see if it's good or not, and I can't do anything with this kind of a short chip stack. And that's something that you need to take into account and call. I would have probably called it with I had ace something because he lost the big pot just the previous hand. And here we are going to be on top left, we are going to be bluffing. And it doesn't matter pretty much what we have here, and it means more that our opponent should should not hit that flop very often, and I believe that people in these games are going to be pretty honest with their hands, and they are going to be folding. And because we got a king there, I think that our opponents should be afraid of it, even though if they hit this flop, it's really unlikely that they are hitting the king, and there might be some flush draws that will call the one card flush draw, and that was probably the hardest one, and that was probably the one that he hit, and probably I should have not added the. And here when we are on the bubble in a $30 game against a slightly random or a reggy looking player, I would be shoving this Jack-9 off pretty often. But in here, I just don't think that if there would have been big antes here already, I could also be calling there against the white player. But if you are having a random player here, I don't think that we are going to get him to fold that often, that he doesn't understand the ICM pressure he's in. And we are trying to grind some small pots here. If we are getting it folded to us, we are going to be shoving with the ace-9 off. Yeah, Markus, I hope so too. It would be horrible, but it was an explanation on why the people are playing worse and why the previous hands matter. And we will be... What's our strategy going to be in the bubble in these games is going to be that we are going to try to win some small pots, and we are trying to avoid collisions with opponents. And here a random looking player min raises, we are having sevens, and sevens is a way too good hand to fold. Actually, I think that I wouldn't be shoving all pocket pairs there, but I think like fives or better, I just can't be folding here on pocket pairs, and something like ace jack. At least I can't be folding something like ace jack suited, ace queen. And if our opponent, the Tomasini, is going to just get in the money, we are going to be abusing him a lot by pretty much min raising every small blind, and it would help us if we would get any cards. But you'll see that our stack size has actually increased. We have not gotten any good cards in this table for a while, but still our stack size is increasing, so... And we will be playing aggressively on the pots that we don't think that our opponents won't hit in these low limit games, because I generally think that our opponents will be looking at their own cards, and then they are looking at their own cards. Do I have a good hand or do I have a bad hand? And that's something that I'm trying to abuse by playing flops aggressively and trying to increase my stack size. And when he limps with the queen 2 suited, I don't believe that we want to see a flop, because even though if the opponent that has been raising a lot suddenly limps, there are practically two options here that the opponent will limp. Either he has a bad hand, but the hand that looks pretty and he wants to see a flop with, or then there is the other option that our opponent will be trapping us with the great hand. So we are looking really stupid if we are shoving the queen deuce suited against something like queens or kings or aces or ace king. But I think the point here is that our opponent mainly doesn't have those traps in his range. He's having some traps, but more often he's going to have a weak hand there. And also, if you are watching this on YouTube, please use 720p or 180p. We are broadcasting every poker broadcast on YouTube. We are broadcasting with full HD quality. So if you are not seeing my HUD or something like that, please. And I don't have my HUD stats open, and I'll check for those. And when there is going to be a player opening here that has mostly limped before, I'm thinking that this player now has a good hand, and I'm going to play a bit. I'm going to need a good hand to go against her at that spot. And I'm actually putting my HUD stats up here if I can find them. So I'm shutting the picture when we don't have a hand, and I'm looking for where I have my HUD stats. Found them. And getting the picture back, and we are back in the game, and we had 13 big blinds, and we are having an ace-10 here. It's actually an edge hand in a sense that if our opponents are playing back a lot at us, we are not going to just open the ace-10, we are going to be shoving it. So in a tough table, we would have been probably shoving it, because the ICM dictates when we are playing about the equal sized stacks there that we can't be playing with a bad hand, and we need to be way ahead of our opponents if we are getting to the pot. So I'm trying to fit the HUD stats to this screen. And if you are starting to use a heads-up display, I'm recommending you that start with a few numbers, like only the amount of hands you have on your opponents and VPIP, PFR. That should be great to get you started. And think about the players, because if you are starting to use a HUD, you probably know how some of your opponents already play. And then start by, if you are classifying the players, then start by looking the VPIPs and PFRs, and start looking at how the players that you know how they play, start looking how they look number-wise, and then it starts to be easier for you in a while. And Jack 7 off, when our opponent limps the second time, I'm going to give him a bit more credit, but when we are hitting a mid pair, we are going to be, at least when our opponent is betting small, we are going to do a call down, and this 4 is actually, it's a horrible card for us there, and our opponent just min betted his 2 pair on the flop, and now we can see that our opponent limps with weak hands. So we are going to be, if our opponent is limping, we are going to be attacking him a lot. So now, even if we didn't get the pot, we got some good information on our opponent. And here, when we min raise, if any of our opponent shoves here, we are going to be getting it all in. And Rotman, because we are doing this broadcast on YouTube, I think that you can watch it later on. I think it will take something like 20 or 30 minutes to appear, so it should be available pretty soon to you. But there is going to be that we are not going to do this longer than 1 hour, and because our opponent, the Sue Hero, we can see from our HUD stats that he has been opening a lot of hands, and here on the bottom right we are having just 2 big blinds against the big blind, and I don't believe that when we are having antes on the table, I don't think that we can fold anything here. Even if our opponent knows that he will need to call 100%, it will be profitable for us to get it all in. And on the top left table, this 50-cent table, now that we are having only 6 big blinds left and something like, I'd say under 10 or 11 big blinds is something that you need to be thinking about shoving a lot. And there will be some parts that you don't want to be shoving, but that's mainly on parts that you are exploiting your opponent's weaknesses by. For example, for me it does require quite a lot to be shoving against this Tomasini, because he has been folding so much to my my smaller opens, and now we got called by 3s. It's actually not a bad call because there is so much in the pot already. And with King Jack suited, it's a pretty much a no-brainer to pay 10 more chips, because something like a King Jack suited is going to be a hand that you can hit really well, and even out of position, if you hit it really well, you'll pretty much get. You'll pretty much know that where you are, and it will be an easier hand to play out of position as well. When there have been limpers in front of me, I will be just limping behind with force. This will be just set mining, and for set mining I'd like to use a call 20 or call 30 rule. And the call 30 rule is when the pot has been previously limped upon. If you're having more than 30 big blinds, it's okay with a pocket pair to be set mining. But when the pot is raised, I think that you'll require about 20 times more than you need to call, still effectively. And here, for example, we need 160 to call, so we would need to be about 3000 chips effectively with our opponent to be calling here. And even though we are hitting a set on 1 time out of 8.5 times, and here when we are having a big blind, we are having antes in, we need to call with 310 off, and we are pretty likely. Actually, I'm explaining a set mining before. So the set mining, even though we are hitting a set, something like it's not something like, but we are hitting 1 out of 8.5 times, and why we aren't just playing or getting set mining every time we are having more than 8.5 times big blinds or more left. And that's because even if we are hitting a set, the set isn't the immortal nuts in poker. Like, we can, if we hit the set, especially if it's going to be a multi-way pot, we are not always even winning the pot. There might be higher sets, straights, flushes, everything that can steal the pot we should be winning with our beautiful set. And also it will be slightly problematic with if there will be like, we set mined here when we had 75 times the amount more So we are having a lot of caution there between what's going to be profitable and what's going to be non-profitable. And also we saw that even when we limped, we couldn't see the flop, so we did set mine, and we couldn't set mine because someone behind us woke up with a better hand. And Callion said that in that deuce is what I would be calling with something like 2k effective stack, maybe a bit shallower because it's going to be 4-way and we do get decent pot odds. And yeah, I'd say that that's one of those situations that you can ditch the call 20 rule, but you need to know when and where. And for just requiring 2k stack to call when there is like 160 to call effectively, I think that it will be on the edge of profitability, because even when it's 4-way, it's going to be a bit harder to get value because oh well, it's a 50-cent game, so it's a bit more likely to get value. But the problem is pretty much that every time that if you are getting it in that you are having just 12 times it left, it's going to be that if you are getting one opponent busted, you are playing for something like 16 times what you would be calling, or 15 times for what you have been calling, and that would require that you would be pretty much busting someone at least 50% of the time. So, and it's more likely that the opponents might be having better pocket pairs there. And in here we are trying to shape the pot into that we can pretty much shove on the river. We are having a top pair and top kicker, and on the 50-cent game, our edge is going to be that we are value betting ruthlessly our opponents, because they are calling with weaker jacks, they might be calling with some 9s, they will be calling us with some straight draws, even some gut shots. So when we are hitting it good, we are going to be merciless in value betting. So that's going to be something to take into account, that when we are hitting really good, we are going to be relentless in value betting. We are using our bluff opportunities, and here we can see in this 50-cent game that just opened, this is going to be an insane game because our opponents have been all in, and they have been with huge raise sizings here. And actually, when I'm carrying on with why there is a call 30 rule for when the pot is limped, and why there is a call 20 rule when the pot is raised. When the pot is raised, it's less likely that there will be someone 3-betting and forcing you to abandon your set mining hopes with your small pocket pair. And it's also, when someone has raised, it means that someone has a good hand already, and when they are having a good hand, it will be more likely also that they will go bust with it. So you are more often, when you are hitting your set, you are getting your opponent stacked. And the set mining is going to work better against random players, but I think some of the regs that if you are third limper and then you start playing really strongly on a flop with something like 4, 9 and jack, I think that most of the better regs will know that you are going to be there with a pretty strong hand. And now I actually forgot what would be the next hand to discuss about. After the explanation on the on the set mining part of poker, but I think the set mining it's a good thing because they are an easy hands, or they are easy hands to play, because you pretty much, when you are getting to the flop, you already know if you are going to be good or if you are having problems in the hand. And that's something that, especially on somewhere like 50 cent, 1.50, $3.50 games, it's going to be profitable. And for a beginner, adding the set mining into your repertoire is going to increase your ROI in an easy way. And just, you need to take into account that you need to be deep enough when you are set mining. And if you have any questions, we have our chat on our website, www.pokerimania.com/forum. If you are just going to www.pokerimania.com, you are getting our Finnish site, and in the Finnish site you can see on the top part of it there will be a link to go to our English site, and that will probably be where it will be more familiar to you. And it's harder than what it looks like when we are playing two different games. And even though these games are the same, they are both 9max turbos, they are having the exact same structures, it feels like I'm playing two different games, because these games are playing so differently and the optimal lines in these games are so different than the optimal lines in these 50 cent games. And in here, when the opponent limped, it makes our shove with sixes even better. It would have been profitable to shove with sixes on small blind, but when there's a limper, I think that he will pretty next to never have a good hand here. And Theo said it was the odds call with 10-4 off from BB, if that was what you asked. Now I can't remember, or I can't understand what you are talking about. So could you elaborate a bit? And if there is some hand that you want to have discussed after we have our games done, please do so. Please do so I can mark the hands and we can look at them with some better tools or whatever. I might be missing some hands that are going to be close and are going to be close in equity. And actually, I'm probably taking like 4 additional tables onto the next screen. Next screen in here because I think that we require some extra tables. And with a weak player, we want to isolate him even more. Oh, the 10-3 offhand. Yeah, that would probably be it. And that would be a pot odds hand. And here, if our opponent checks, we are going to be continuation betting this. And a random player should fold it pretty often. And actually we don't even have the table open anymore. More so it might be that we can't discuss about it anymore. And Calleon had a funny hand in a 6-max. I think that's an interesting hand, and that's something that will require a bit of an explanation on why. Actually, in here I should have bet more, something like 175. Because if our opponent is going to be calling too wide, and I actually hate this a bit when the river comes through. I'm going for a larger value there still. Button open. I'm going to give him rope to play aggressively there. And just be check calling against him too. And I think that I'm going to bet small here and hope that he will bet over me. And I think that with a queen, that was one of those hands that if he's having a queen there, I think that I will be missing an opponent's bet, that opponent won't bet the river with queen, but he will call a small bet on the river with a queen. And also something that I think that will be happening. Actually, I'm taking this $15 game to the other screen. And let's have these $30 games going. I'm opening some of these, one more session on the other screen so that we will have interesting situations to the end. And that's actually a good explanation on Calleon's part. And I might be missing some more spots when I added some more tables, but I hope that I won't be missing too much. It's always a bit harder when I need to think in English than play 8 tables at the same time, but I think we'll manage. And I know that Rothman had plenty of questions in the Finnish side of things, and if we are having enough time, I'm going to look at some of those Rothman's questions on the Finnish side and try to translate them into English and trying to perhaps respond to some of those. Now we are having 8 games going. I couldn't get the $30 9-maxes running, so we will have 2 $15 9-maxes and 2 50-cent 9-maxes going. And in here, even though our opponent goes all in, I think that ace queen is going to be a bit too good of a hand to fold, especially that what we have seen in these games that our opponents will play pretty wide array of hands, to say the least. And for this hand, the Ponti Lemons re-raise with just 6 big blinds is horrible, because he's not having any fold equity here. So the opponent is not folding pretty much any hand here, and he's kept getting it all in with 8-5 suited. So that's probably one of the most horrible games that there has been happening during this set, and that's pretty. So if you are thinking about 3-betting your opponent, you should always be asking yourself, is my opponent ever going to fold? Should my opponent ever fold? And what is my stack size here? And sit and goes are mostly about playing the situation. So when sit and goes are mostly about playing the situation, you need to learn the basic situations and how to respond on the basic situation, how to think about the certain situations, like what is about the amount of chips you need if your opponent is doing a small raise to make him still fold. And that's something that you pretty much need to just... And this is actually one of those spots that we should have enough, but our hand isn't that good. Actually, this is going to be a pretty... When this opponent hasn't raised a single time before, I'm going to be folding ace-6 suited. Even though it's a decent hand, it blocks some of the aces that our opponent can have. But if we get called, so if we shove there, we get called, we are most likely getting called with hands that we are... At most we are having something like 55% or 55-60% equity against something like King Jack or Queen Jack, and if our opponent calls, it's most likely we are going to be dominated in the situation. So we would be risking a lot there, and if our opponent hasn't raised a single time, it's going to be too much of a risk to take. And here, even when we spike a 9 on the turn, we are still going to play it pretty carefully. And in the river, we are going to do a small value bet on the bottom right, and hope to get called with a weaker 9 or something like that. And of course, when we are playing situations, we are also playing players. We are playing with different ranges if our opponents are going to be playing with a wide range. We are going to be playing differently. And black ace 40-52. When he opens 3x, I think that I still have fold equity here, and with deuces, I'm not getting as screwed as I'm getting with an ace-6 if my opponent calls, because I'm only getting crushed by a bigger pocket pair, and that's exactly what my opponent had there. Which is, I'd say it's more unlucky than... And when opponent opens 3x, I don't think that I'm having much fold equity here, even when one opponent... And we are playing it a bit careful in bottom left, because we have seen that our opponent has limped ace-10 before, like 2 or 3 hands ago. So, but we will still... We don't want to make it easy for him to just limp call every opportunity that he has, so... And yeah, the ace-6 suited, it's not a great hand to call. And it's not a great hand to call, especially if we are trying to if we are trying to describe solid strategies, because playing ace-6 suited out of position on the bubble against a tight range, it's if you are describing sit and go hell with a hand, you are pretty much describing it there. Yeah, that deuces hand, it might induce a rigged site comment somewhere on the internet. But it's also that if you're playing a lot of live poker, you probably see the same stuff happening on live as well, even though the game isn't rigged. It's just, if you are getting it in with kings against deuces, you are going to lose about 1 in 6. So, but people are thinking that if you are having a better hand, you should always win. And I think poker wouldn't be as great of a game if you would always win when you should win. And it makes it a lot more complex and harder to figure out. Also for your opponents when there is decent amount of variance in every situation. But if we are thinking about how our strategies are changing when we are moving from micro stakes to mid stakes, there is going to be less easy chips in these mid stakes games. So even early on, we are looking for more opportunities to exploit our opponents, and in these micro stakes, we are mostly trying to play a bit tighter, trying to hit value hands, and when our opponents are playing too tight, exploit those. So we are playing pretty aggressively on small blind and button even in these micro stake games. Dmitry is playing a bit wider. I think this is a good opportunity to be shoving here because he has been opening quite a lot, and when this opponent just calls, I think that he will most likely have a bad hand here, so this is a good opportunity to increase our stack size. And king queen, even if we get called, if it's not ace king, ace queen, or aces or kings or queens, we are not in a horrible shape. Table 3, if it's this table with the 3-5 off, it's not. I'm going to look at it a bit later on. I just think that if our opponent is not going to be folding a lot there, but we are still having showdown equity and the opponent isn't also betting that often, I think that we are getting to the river so often that we don't need to bet the flop that often, even though we are going to get the pot pretty often if we bet, and there are not a lot of good cards in the deck for us. And in here it starts to get a bit more interesting when this vision guy has 3-bet us a lot, so we are now getting him a bit more respect, and we are shaping our ranges to be more trappy ranges. And when we are having 30 big blinds and we are having our opponent 3-bet us a lot and there is a smaller stack, usually in sit and goes, if we are comparing it to if you are going to be 4th or 3rd, there will be I think there will be 20% price pool jump. But if you are going from 3rd to 2nd, there is only a 10% price pool jump, and from 2nd to 1st, there's again a 20% price pool jump. So you'll most likely you can be playing a lot more aggressively when you are through the bubble. But that doesn't mean that there is no value in in being cautious after the bubble has already burst. So we will be playing cautious against the big stack player here, because this short stack player is so short in here. And actually with the 3-5 hand, when the Respigor only limps, if we wouldn't hit anything with the 3-5 off, I think it would have been better to 10 min bet flop if we have practically no showdown equity. But when we have some showdown equity and we are getting to a showdown cheaply, then we are utilizing those spots. Even though it gives our opponent 2 more cards to outdraw us. It's close, because this Dimitri and Autop are both have been 3-betting us pretty much. And we need to fold against both of these guys if you open the ace-8 off. Its vision hasn't folded a single big blind to me, but this Respigor has folded a lot of big blinds. And it's it's getting a bit ugly, because because the Respigor is so short, we pretty much need just to go there against him, even though we know that our hand isn't likely being the best hand there. King 10 suited, if our opponent will be shoving a ton there, or will be something like a Regis player shoving from SP, we are going to be calling with. And when Vision has 3-bet us a lot, then we are, if we can't stand a 3-bet there and our opponent will 3-bet us a lot, then we'll try an alternative strategy and we'll start limping and stabbing the pots. When we see that our opponent does want to see flops or shove us out of the pot pre-flop, then we are just making it harder on them to do it. And Markus Y is having a crazy run again today, up already $200 and now 1 out of 8 in an $8 180 man. Keep it up. Keep it up and ship it. And now that we are going to be playing heads up, we are utilizing a pretty basic heads up strategy. And the pretty basic heads up strategy dictates that when we don't know anything about our opponents, we are going to be min betting really widely. Like we don't even have a bad enough hand to not be opening, and we will be playing aggressively when we are still having 23 big blinds. Even with the bottom pair, I think that now our showdown value isn't that great, so what plan you had if villain had raised to 500 to 700 in the queen 10 suited hand? Probably if the villain raised it the first time around, I would let it slide and I could pretty much fold it, because there's still it's still going to be hard to play it really profitably. And if our opponent If our opponent is folding 50% or more, we are automatically making profit. And those times that our villain is folding his own button, we are making even more. And when we are... Actually, we haven't seen our opponent to do that much post-flop, but we have seen him fold a lot, so we will get her a chance to bluff us out. And when there is most of the stack already in, we are going to get rest of it in and hope that he isn't having a better hand there. And now we are getting into a better situation. I'd say way better situation. And even though our opponent had 3-bet us a ton when we were 3-handed, I think that most of the players are having completely disconnected heads-up strategies. And when our opponent has lost a large pot, then 9-king suited becomes a really easy call, because our opponent will be tilt shoving a lot there, and will be tilt shoving a lot of weak hands. Let's see what will be the more interesting. Actually, we are only having this last 50-cent game, and I think this has been a great show, and because now we have seen some 9 maxes that, even though they are the same game, the optimal strategy differs a lot. And it's, even though some players play pretty similarly, it's more about how many players that are playing badly are there in a certain game. Yeah, when we saw that our villain in heads up got to the flop with 5-8 off, it's saying that our opponent doesn't care that much that what his hand strength will be. So he's or her. He had a female avatar, so it might be her as well. So this is a horrible situation. I think it's in cutoff. If our opponents are folding enough, it will be a good open. And with the ace-deuce off, shoving is probably the most plus EV option. Can you mark the odds call hand bottom left, please? The raise call. And actually we lost one of our 50-cent tables. King 10 suited. It's going to be hard, and I will be marking that hand. In here, when we are, our worst enemy in the table is this USA TJ. So we are... Basically, we don't want to give him any chips, and our king-queen off is going to be a great hand against a single opponent in most of the situations. But this time it wasn't good enough, and now we are only having low stakes and mid stakes games going on. All of our micro stakes game have already been lost, and I'm trying to fetch the Queen 4 hand. That is an odds call hand there. And Galleon said that running good in the higher buy-in games is key in these, and I tend to agree. I'm having a slight problem. I did only see 67 hands, but I had an expression filter on, so now I'll get to find the queen 4. With the final act, he's playing really aggressively, and I think that I'm having fold equity on him. And with deuces, I'm not in a crappy situations against most of his range, even if he calls. But if something is important, it's running good on the largest games you are playing. That's pretty much that's pretty key in winning a lot. I tested that my HUD works and stuff, and I have already won something like $150 today, so pretty much no matter what happens in these tables anymore, I'm on the plus side anyway, so. Even though I must say that I haven't got into the money as often as I would have liked thus far. If he would have something like 2.5k, this would be a clearer shove, because then there would be more sense for Darin VJ to fold, because he would have a better equity there, and an unknown player in a $15 game shoves with less than 10 big blinds from small blind, and I'm going to be calling with King 9. Even though it's dog of a hand, K9. And if we are having mostly Finns here, I think the pun might be a bit lost, but well, it put a smile on my face, and that's the most important thing, right? And in here we are going to be pretty aggressive, and with something like Ace-Jack we don't mind if we get it all in against this Darin VJ, because his stack size is going to be small anyways, and we are likely getting it in good. And doubt that the 6-3 will show profit. It's in general, if the opponent is a clear mid-stack, then it is even better, because then the opponent can't call a lot. But when he's pretty much tied against the other mid-stacks, then it might be worse. And here, when the still low opens and we are having just 600 chips, we are going to be folding this pretty quickly, because it's an opportunity for these two to collide, and when the opponent opens 3x, I think that it's really likely that he's going to be colliding with this mobile phone player. But we are having our final 4 tables here, and we are probably getting it getting our hand all in here with ace-king. And here, when we see that Stillo is probably not a good player and there is the mobile phone player that's a pretty loose cannon, we are going to play more passively than in general we would play, because there is a great chance of eliminations happening in this bottom left $15 game. It's close in here that could we even shove it profitably, because the opponent just limps, but I'm smelling a bit fishy when an opponent that has been playing pretty solid pre-flop thus far suddenly limps that he's probably having a better hand there, and then I'm not being insane with my, then I'm not being that wide with my shoves. But there will be a lot of interesting hands to also look through. And actually, now that I can see all of the hands, I can also see the... Igimli hasn't done anything that stupid. 4-5 suited is a bit ugly, and without antes, I don't think that it's going to be that profitable. And I hate that Stillo got a big pot. And because Igimli hasn't done anything that stupid, I'm calling with ace-7 suited, because I think that in general it increases the likelihood that our opponent is a reg there. And when we see that Stillo pretty much got all in against the Ryan, we know that he's going to be... And when the final act is shoving, we will carry on and call him as well. And I think that if the opponents are shoving close to Nash, both of these calls will be profitable. And we got to the chip lead again. Let's open the price structure. Here you can see that the first guy gets half of the prize pool, actually a bit more. And second guy gets 30%, third guy gets... The third guy gets 20. And if the final act shoves, it's going to be an easy call with any ace, any king, good queens, actually any queen suited, pretty much any pocket pair. So... And... no. I just thought that we could be getting it. Getting another heads up going, but not yet. And we are back into being all about the equal stacked, and that's something that I don't like that much. And as we can see that the final act is playing on most of these games, I think that he was also registered in $60 games, so probably he's specializing in these 9 max turbos. And in here the final act raises, when we are having less than half of the pot to call, we are getting more than 1/3 odds, and then we need to pretty much call with any hand, and with a suited hand it's going to be an easy call, especially when the final act's range is going to be really wide there. And as Calleon said that ace-7 off was ugly. Yeah, it wasn't an easy call. And Marcus Y won the $8 180 man. Congrats! And even in these mid-stakes games, my general approach to heads up is that I'm going to be pretty much opening every button, and I'm going to be reacting on how often my opponent opens every button and how he's reacting to me opening every button. If he's just folding most of his hands, I'm going to be opening everything. And if he starts to play back at me a lot, then I'm going to be changing my strategy. But my general strategy, which is really profitable, is going to be opening every small blind until I see something that makes me adjust to the villain's tendencies. With something like Jack 9 suited is something that players are afraid to shove, even though it's a really profitable shove, because even if you are called, you are likely not getting dominated, and you are having decent equity against, or you are having really good equity against smaller pocket pairs, and you are not completely screwed against pretty much anything. So I think that most players, if they are having a problem with their shove ranges, the problems are most likely that they are overestimating the equity of the weak aces, and they are underestimating the equity of solid suited connecting hands. And if Igimli is shoving like 60%, it's going to be easy for us to call with ace-9. It's actually pretty easy to call with pretty much the whole Nash range. I think winning the $8 180 man gives you something like $400, so that's not too shabby. Let's actually mark the ace-7 hand as well for review. And when we are about 8 big blinds deep, 7 or 8 big blinds deep, I'm going to be pretty much shoving Nash and calling Nash if my opponent doesn't show me otherwise. And now I have had such 2 horrible hands to shove and no calling hands, and that will sometimes be a bit frustrating. We had a public-private coaching with Marcus Y a few days ago, or a few weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, in the Finnish side, and there I said that Marcus Y has one big leak, or has had a one big leak in his game, and it was that he hasn't increased his stakes quickly enough. So I think he's now doing it, and he's doing really well. So it's also in the MTT sit and goes, when you are running good, you are running really good, and that's going to be something to take into account. But I think that that's probably something that you'll need to lose the $2.5 180 mans and add something like the $5 90 man progressive knockouts instead. With Queen 9 off, I'm a bit unsure if this is shove. I'm pretty sure it is, because these opponents are so short, and here I'm thinking that this Igimli probably isn't a reg, because he's folding a ton, I think way too much heads up, but that's good for us, because now we won the heads up and we are having a great stack in another $30 turbo. So it looks like it's going to be a good night for Aarnimetsa today. And this is actually one of those hands. It might be that we don't have enough time to go through most of the hands, because I need to be ending this broadcast in pretty soon, because the YouTube editor can't edit the video files if we are running more than 2 hours. So we are going to cut this short of 2 hours, and I don't know how much time I have, so we'll see. And when this player is a player that I like to play against, even with 4 big blinds deep, I think that the opponent isn't going to be playing correctly, so I'm going to be shoving there even wider than Nash most of the time. So that's something that I think that most of the players, if they are seeing that, oh, my opponent is a player that I want to play against and he's playing so loosely at the early game, but most of these players are playing like the inverse of solid sit and go strategy. They're playing loose at the early game and then they're playing tight at the end game. So they are like maximizing their opportunity to lose money in the games, and that's why they are players that I like to play against. And Tupe asks when it's a good time to make a home game. I think that we are going to be ending at the latest 2250. So if you are putting it open 2250, it's going to be a good time to open the home game. And now we are having an interesting spot in this $30 game because these guys are tight. So it makes it profitable. If both of these guys, we would know that they would be good regs, we could pretty much shove any two here. Because these guys are so short that even if they call, it doesn't matter that much to us. And these guys, if these guys fold, these guys need to fold practically every other hand than aces. So it would be an interesting situation. And even if it looks like that he calls with 7-10 off, and it looks like it might be a horrible call, it's not a horrible call because of the pot odds he was getting. So yeah, 2250 is a good time for a home game. And if you are a new viewer, if you like what we are doing, please support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, like our Facebook page, join our forum and take part of the next session live, know earlier what the next session will be about, and have your suggestions on what we will concentrate on. So. And now when we are doing this on YouTube, you will pretty soon see the opportunity to watch this later on. But you will always see what's going on in our channel if you subscribe, and then you'll see. In Finnish, we have been adding something like, I think, an average of 4 videos per week on our coaching sessions, and on English we are averaging 1 or 2. So, and I think on the summertime if you are liking sit and goes, you should follow our channel, because I'm going to focus on making a lot of sit and go content on different structures, and there are a lot of sit and go structures to go through. And if you join our forum, you can also join our home game, and you can see that Tupe has put a link on our home games. And that will be something that if you want to have fun and compete against other Poker-Imanians, please join us there. And Hans Czech has been opening every single hand. So it's easy for us, especially when we are the shortest stack left in the game, to call him. And with the final act, I think that I'm going to get him to shove a bit more often when I'm just min-raising here with ace-6 suited. And Markus Y is having another final table in a 250 180 man and can't lose a pot, so well, good for you. And a $600 day is nothing to sneeze about, so it sounds like a really good day. And it depends a bit on how we will approach this heads up with the final act. And we are having a ton of outs. Unfortunately, we didn't hit any of those. And this heads up might seem a bit boring because there isn't that much you can do when it's only about 10 BBs deep. So it's going to be... But it's going to be what the heads ups are going to be in a turbo sit and ghost. Most of the heads up aren't deeper than this effectively. So playing heads ups with this kind of stack depth well is going to be key in winning more games. And Grind Nation, yeah, join our home games group, especially now when Tupe can accept you instantly. So it should be pretty quick for you to join, and there will be the next home game in just 10 minutes. And we get the money in good, and I think that we are getting a really good session because we won two of our 120 mans. I don't know. I think that we won something like... I'd say that we are having a pretty good day when I just did a quick check on our HUD if it's working, and I think I played 10 games and won something like $124. And now I won $70 more during this coaching session with only 12 more games. But it's always a win. I'll take it. And there are some hands that we should look through. So I'll open a Hold'em Resources calculator, and Jack 4 off, it's going to be bad. Yeah, the opponent shoving the Jack 4 off, it's not going to be that good. Let's have an easy hand first. Let's have this 3-10 off hand. When a reg is shoving here, so I think that he's going to be pretty close to Nash, and we are having just 3 big blinds left, and there's antes in game already. So let's see how it goes. So first we are going to do the view hand details. Then we are going to copy the hand to clipboard. In Hold'em Resources calculator, we are opening basic hand. We are selecting the correct price structure. We are pasting the hands from clipboard, and we are going to see what the HRC calculator says about this hand. What should our range be here? And if Shy Cakes is shoving correctly, it's about 21% of hands we can call with almost everything, and actually 10-3 off is one of those hands that we can't call. But that's such an edge hand, and we are losing all of our fold equity if we fold here, so I like to gamble a bit on these spots, even if it's slightly minus EV, to get a bigger stack and to get the stack that can be utilized as a weapon against rest of the table. And then there is another hand. This is also an easy hand to go through, this 6-3 off hand, and we are playing against a reg. And this might also be because I know that on my stats and on my experience, this reg has been... I think this reg has been really tight. So I'm thinking that he's going to be tighter than Nash even. But I have seen a video on another site that showed him as a more aggressive player, and I think that he has improved his game somewhat. So it's an interesting spot. And we can see that when Kaleon said that the 6-3 off isn't going to be a shove here, if everyone plays correctly, 6-3 off is going to be a huge shove here. So we can also look at, let's see if I can see that what is the range that our opponent would need to call that our weak hands are. And if our opponent is calling here more than 35%, then we can't shove 6-3 off. So, and I don't think that our opponent will call 35% here. So I think that it's going to be a solid shove, this 6-3 off. So when you, Kaleon, saw these calculations, do you still say that 6-3 suited is not going to show a profit? Because I'm standing behind my play here and I was a bit unsure in game, but when I saw that his stack size is 2.3k, I think that it's going to be enough that he's thinking that he's going to survive most of the time if he just plays it safe. And what's this hand all about? Well, this was a previous hand. Here is the Queen 4 suited hand. And this was a bit of a harder hand to analyze, because in here we first raised, then this Respigor shoved against us. And why this is a harder hand to calculate? Because we need to use the advanced hand, so let's see how it goes. We are going to the Hold'em Resources calculator, we are doing an advanced hand, we are pasting the stack sizes from clipboard, we are doing a 3-bet calculation, and we are using a raise size of just 2, or we are using a raise size that's min raise, and let's go. Let's see how it turns out. So we could raise here pretty widely, and we are raising here less than the 42% because this Vision 66 was shoving a ton over us. If our opponent is shoving 30% against us, then we would need to call 42%. And if I'm looking this correctly, and we can plot this on how much our opponent would need to shove so we couldn't call Queen 4 suited. And actually I said that we are not going to be shoving or opening as wide, and then our Queen 4 suited isn't even included in the ranges. So when we are plotting range against hand equities and Aarnimetsa's hand equities, and let's say the Queen 4 suited, what's another edge hand? Let's say 10-9 off, another edge hand, King 6 off. Let's have a deuces, for example. And Respigor 3-bets, and we can see that if he 3-bets over 5%, deuces will be a good call. And the Queen 4 suited, the range that it starts to be a good call is about 15 to 16%. And if we are looking about what kind of range that 15-16% would be, the 15 to 16% range, I think that this kind of range would include like all of the pretty hands, and I think our opponent will at least shove this much when he's such short stacked. So I think that the call with Queen 4 suited is okay, but that doesn't mean that, opening with the Queen 4 suited would be okay. And I think that when I see it and we remember how wide this Vision 66 was, that opening Queen 4 suited isn't going to be profitable in that kind of a spot. So that's something to take into account. And there's the Ace 7 hand also. Let's replay the hand. Igimli shoves for 8 big blinds. We are through the bubble and we are the largest stack, and the Igimli is the shortest stack around, and he's going to be hit with a big blind next hand. So let's see if this is going to be a profitable. Let's see if this is going to be a profitable call for me. What do you think before you can see what happens? For some reason I forgot to copy it, but now I'm pasting the stack sizes from clipboard. And copying and pasting these stack sizes from clipboard, this increases the speed that you can run through hands with the Hold'em resources a lot. And I think that should be something that will be really useful if you are using Hold'em resources, and I can't see a reason why you shouldn't, because Hold'em resources is awesome. And we'll see here that if Igimli is opening 30.4% of the hands, Ace 7 off is going to be a call, and we can plot these range versus hand equities against our hand equities, and we can do something like Ace 7, Ace 9, and Ace 9 on when they will be a call. And Ace 7 will be a call if our opponent opens more than 26%. So, and if we are using the Igimli races, we can then go to like the 27% and we can see what our call range will be. Or this is actually Igimli's range, what there would be. And we can see that the Nash range is about 30%. And Kaleon, it would be convenient for the replayer to have that copy text button. Yeah, it would be really convenient, but I think it's way better than in Hold'em Manager 2, where you can't copy the text from replayer at all, but you need to search the hand again. And because our YouTube time of 2 hours is going to be at an end, I'm going to just say that please join our home games. They are starting now. If you are going to sleep, have a good night. And if you are still playing poker, have the most winningest of poker nights. See you again on these sessions. Bye!